In the middle of the 20th century, humanity was obsessed with the atom. The energy unleashed from uranium seemed like the solution to all problems, from electricity to space exploration. It was at this time that engineering minds in the United States asked themselves, what if we could create a vehicle that could run for decades without refueling? This is how the idea was born for a machine that came to be known as the nuclear tractor. This concept was developed by General Motors and was originally intended to support an ambitious project: the creation of a giant all-terrain vehicle capable of crossing any landscape. This mechanical monster, packed with the most advanced technologies, was supposed to operate autonomously in the most remote corners of the planet. At its core, it was to be powered by a miniature nuclear reactor. Unlike conventional internal combustion engines, this power source would allow the vehicle to operate for decades without the need for fuel or recharging. Contrary to expectations, the project was not dismissed as science fiction. General Motors actually built several experimental prototypes, although for now they did not include a nuclear power unit. The most astonishing thing is that one of these machines, the Leto TC497, actually existed. This design consisted of a tractor with 4 diesel generators and a long chain of trailers on hundreds of wheels. It was intended for military supply operations in areas without roads. The convoy was nearly 60 yards long, and its total carrying capacity was astonishing. Imagine a train without rails crawling across the desert. Although the reactor was never actually installed, the very fact that corporations seriously developed such technology sounds both frightening and fascinating at the same time. The idea that a machine with a nuclear heart could crawl across the land seems not just fantastical, it still sends a chill down the spine. But while some dreamed of nuclear autonomy, others were building something far more formidable. Imagine a machine that looks like a hybrid of a tank, a sports car, and an engineer's wildest fantasy. This is the Ripsaw, the craziest tracked platform in the world, created by the American company How and How Technologies. The name translates as chainsaw, and honestly, it reflects its character better than any technical specifications could. Ripsaw doesn't just drive fast, it tears up the ground beneath it. This monster can accelerate up to 60 miles per hour. And it's on tracks. For comparison, most battle tanks struggle to reach 25 miles per hour. Now imagine this beast racing across rough terrain, leaping over ditches and smashing through fences as if they were made of paper. But it's not just Ripsaw's speed that's shocking. It can be equipped with machine guns, grenade launchers, a remote control module, and even an artificial intelligence system. Some modifications are operated entirely without a driver. They operate like drones on tracks, carrying out commands in combat situations. It is often used in demonstrations for military delegations. The reason is simple. No other tracked platform combines such deadly efficiency with such a wild appearance. Its shape is angular and aggressive, as if it were cut straight out of a post-apocalyptic comic book. It's no surprise that the Ripsaw has appeared in movies like Fast and Furious and Mad Max. It really does look like it escaped straight from the big screen. And now imagine, this machine actually sits in hangars, rolls out onto test ranges, and is capable of unleashing hell in just a few seconds. But if you think tracks are the peak of engineering madness, you haven't yet seen a machine that doesn't drive, but walks. A mechanical octopus. Engineering imagination can go very far, but sometimes it literally comes to life in metal. Mantis, a hydraulic 8-legged machine from the UK, looks like a living nightmare straight out of science fiction. It doesn't drive, it doesn't crawl. It moves slowly and methodically, stepping like a giant mechanical spider that has crawled out of a mad scientist's laboratory. The Mantis weighs about 4.5 tons, stands nearly 3.5 yards tall, and its 8 steel legs are powered by powerful hydraulic drives. The control system is reminiscent of piloting a helicopter, a bunch of levers, screens, and buttons. Inside the cockpit, the pilot feels as if they're inside a combat mech from a video game. The creators at Micromagic Systems didn't build the machine for war. It's an engineering experiment. But the visual effect is simply stunning. When the Mantis starts moving, it doesn't just walk, it strides across the ground with majestic, intimidating grace. Its movements seem alive, almost animal-like, evoking a mix of awe and fear in the audience. Engineers spent years perfecting the synchronization of all the legs' movements. Every step requires precise calculation of the pressure and turning angle of each leg. One mistake, and the machine loses its balance. It's a true tribute to engineering stubbornness. The Mantis is rarely used in practice, it's just too bulky. But as a demonstration of what humans are capable of when they decide to build a walking machine, it has no equal. It's simply astonishing that something like this even exists. And now imagine all this mechanical beauty put on rails and armed with cannons. The armored train killer, a forgotten era of war, when giant trains were turned into mobile fortresses. But one of them became truly legendary. the Soviet armored train called Zabaikal. Built in the mid-20th century, it looked as if someone had decided to combine a tank column with a locomotive. This monster on rails was clad in thick armor and armed with a real arsenal: artillery guns, anti-aircraft guns, machine guns, and even mortars. Essentially, it was a warship on the railroad. Its mission was to protect strategic sections from saboteurs and enemy offensives. The length of such a train could reach up to 100 yards, and its combat power was comparable to several tanks. The crew consisted of dozens of people, including radio operators, artillerymen, machine gunners, and even mechanics. But the real wild part was its mobility. Despite its size, the Zabaikal could accelerate up to 30 miles per hour, outpacing some modern freight trains. It moved through the taiga, camouflaging itself and suddenly appearing where it was least expected. After the end of the Cold War, most armored trains became history, but the Zabaikal still intimidates with its appearance and makes you wonder just how far people were willing to go to win a war. However, not all feats of engineering madness are hidden behind armor and cannons. Sometimes it lives among mines and deserts in the form of a giant on wheels. The beast from the desert, the Belaz 75701, is a mining dump truck built in Belarus, and it is rightfully considered one of the largest vehicles on the planet. It looks as if it was designed to carry houses, not coal. Its height is almost 25 feet and its length is about 60. Just one of its wheel rims is taller than the average person, and the total weight of the loaded vehicle can exceed 1,000,000 pounds. This isn't a machine, it's a moving earthquake platform. The Belaz is capable of transporting over 400 tons of cargo in a single trip, and it does this across rough terrain and quarries. Horns is just a word. A 4,000 horsepower engine turns wheels as big as a room, and the driver's cab looks like the bridge of a spaceship. Despite its size, this giant is operated by a single person. Everything else is handled by sensors, hydraulics, and computers. From the height of the cab, the world around looks like a toy. Cars resemble ants, and people look like grains of sand. Machines like these work in the mines of Australia, Canada, and South America. They transport ore, gravel, and coal, turning human effort into a giant industrial spectacle. And yet, even next to this giant, there are machines that not only drive, they think, shoot, and move without a person inside. The invisible truck. When you hear the phrase invisible transport, your imagination conjures up science fiction, holograms, camouflage, and scientific magic. But in reality, something similar already exists. The American military truck Oshkosh L-ATV is a modern engineering marvel capable of disappearing. Not literally, of course, but to radars and even thermal imagers. This armored vehicle was created as a replacement for the famous HMMWV, better known as the Humvee. But that's where the similarities end. The Oshkosh L-ATV is no longer just a military vehicle. It's a high-tech platform capable of surviving in the most extreme conditions of modern warfare. Its body is made from composite materials that disperse radio waves. In other words, enemy radars simply don't see it the way they see ordinary vehicles. It is equipped with the TAC-4i system. This is an intelligent suspension that can adapt to terrain conditions in fractions of a second. The vehicle senses the road and instantly adjusts the stiffness of the shock absorbers. This not only increases off-road capability, it makes movement almost invisible. No sudden jolts, minimal noise, perfect control, and all of this is housed in an armored capsule that protects against bullets, shrapnel, and explosions. The truck can be equipped with weapons, remote control modules, and even electronic warfare systems. It can be operated by a driver or move fully autonomously, and in some cases, it can even hide from thermal images by cooling its exterior surface using a clever heat dissipation system. But while this truck tries to remain unnoticed, the next machine, on the contrary, announces its presence with the full power of its aircraft turbines, doing so just above the surface of the water. A mobile airfield. If a sea monster could fly, it would look exactly like this. The Loon-class Ikranoplan is one of the strangest and most astonishing flying machines in history. Built in the Soviet Union, it combined the features of a ship, an airplane, and a missile platform. Imagine a machine over 300 yards long, weighing about 400 tons, capable of moving just a few feet above the water at speeds of over 300 miles per hour. This is not a mistake. The Lan didn't sail or fly, but glided above the surface using the ground effect, a cushion of air that forms between the hull and the water as it moves. This Ikranoplan was armed with 6 Mosquet anti-ship missiles, true sea killers capable of striking targets dozens of miles away. Its role was a blitzkrieg across the water's surface. It appeared, struck, and vanished. Radar could hardly detect it. It flew too low. Air defenses didn't have time to react. It was a true nightmare for any navy. The Loon was built as a single prototype, and even alone, it caused a sensation. It had a crew of 15, including navigators, radio operators, and launch commanders. When it went out to sea, every maneuver looked like a demonstration of alien technology. Today it stands decommissioned and rusting, but even in this state it inspires awe. A machine that defied the laws of physics and common sense yet was absolutely real. However, the next giant underground is no less incredible. It doesn't fly and it doesn't drive. It chews through mountains, a hellish drill. Its name is Bertha. And it's not just a machine, it's an underground drilling goddess. Built in Japan and used in Seattle, Bertha became the largest shield tunneling machine in the world. It is over 300 feet long, and the diameter of its cutting head is more than 70 feet. That means it could dig a tunnel wide enough for a 4-lane highway to pass through easily. When Bertha was launched, the city trembled. Its blades cut through concrete, rock, and even old underground structures. It chewed through the earth with relentless regularity, almost 30 feet a day. Right behind it, an automated process followed, reinforcing the tunnel walls, pumping out water, and laying new sections. The machine was operated using a centralized navigation system. Any deviation, and the project could turn into a disaster. And it cost nearly $2 billion. That's why Bertha became a true local legend. Her stops, breakdowns, and breakthroughs were discussed in the news like celebrity gossip. Engineers said that inside the drilling head, the temperature was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the noise was so intense that they had to work in special soundproof suits. Bertha did not tolerate the weak. When she finished her journey, she was dismantled, but her spirit and the tunnel she dug remained, a symbol of how steel and ingenuity can conquer even the earth itself. However, there are machines that are built not for underground battles, but to float in the middle of the ocean and be larger than an entire city block. A floating city. There are factories, and then there is the Prelude FLNG, a floating plant over 480 yards long. It is the largest floating structure ever created by mankind. It extracts, processes, and ships natural gas, but right in the middle of the ocean. Prelude is the brainchild of the Shell Corporation. Its task is to receive gas from the seabed, process it into liquefied form, and load it onto tankers. In other words, it combines the functions of a drilling platform, a chemical plant, and a port. Quite literally, it is a factory on the horizon. Seeing it in person, many people say this can't be real. And yet it is. Up to 200 people work on board. There are living quarters, generators, antennas, warehouses, helipads, and even tornado protection systems. Just to anchor Prelude, special anchors weighing dozens of tons were required. The scale is astonishing. Everything that happens inside is automated. Hundreds of pipes, reactors, pumps, and refrigerators operate around the clock. It is a true floating ecosystem built at the cutting edge of technology. Prelude doesn't just float, it can withstand cyclones, 100-foot waves, and winds of 150 miles per hour. Its hull bends like a living organism, absorbing the blows of nature. But even this, believe it or not, is not the limit of engineering madness, because there is a machine capable of walking through the forest on steel legs and toppling trees like an alien monster. A tank with a brain. When people talk about the tanks of the future, they imagine armored giants with cannons and lasers. But what truly makes a tank futuristic is its brain. And the tank called the BAE Black Knight became the first step toward creating a combat vehicle that can think for itself. The Black Knight was developed as an experimental unmanned tank. No crew, no driver, no gunner. All control is done either through a remote station or in autonomous mode. Yes, you heard that right. This machine is capable of navigating terrain on its own, recognizing threats, and making tactical decisions. On the outside, it looks like a typical modern tank. Tracks, turret, cannon. But inside, there are cameras, radars, motion sensors, and artificial intelligence. It can independently choose its route, avoid obstacles, detect targets, and even request permission to open fire. The positioning and movement control system allows it to move with inch-level precision, and its thermal imagers and laser rangefinders make its vision far more effective than a human's. All of this makes the Black Knight a true robot on the battlefield. But what's even more unsettling is that it was created in the 2000s. In other words, even back then, engineers were already considering replacing humans in tanks, the fire whale. When a forest fire covers dozens of miles, ordinary fire trucks are powerless. That's when it takes to the skies. The Boeing 747 supertanker, one of the largest airplanes in the world, converted into a firefighting machine. This flying giant is capable of carrying more than 19,000 gallons of water or fire-suppressing foam on board. It doesn't just drop water, it creates a wall of rain, dense as a curtain. A single one is enough to stop a fire front several hundred yards wide. The aircraft flies at low altitude, just a few hundred feet above the ground. This demands incredible precision from the pilots, and we're talking about a 4-engine airliner over 200 feet long. Everything about it is pushed to the limit, from aerodynamics to logistics. The supertanker has been used in California, Israel, Chile, Anywhere fire got out of control. Its appearance in the sky is like the arrival of an airborne titan. One drop, and the landscape changes. But even this giant is not as fearsome as the next beast because it fears neither water nor fire. It moves where humans cannot survive, and it was created to conquer the coldest place on the planet. You've seen it in movies. You thought it was just a prop. But the Landmaster is real. The machine from the film? It really exists. And it works. The Landmaster is a hybrid of a tank, a truck, and a motorhome. It's almost 30 feet long with 12 wheels, each pair of which can tilt to overcome obstacles. It drives over slopes, mountains, and swamps. It doesn't float, but it crawls. Originally built for a movie, the Landmaster turned out to be so durable and functional that they decided not to scrap it. The vehicle has survived for decades and is still capable of moving. Its body is made of 1-inch thick steel. Inside, there's an autonomous life support system, water tanks, and air filtration systems. It was tested on real proving grounds. It overcame concrete barriers, drove through swamps, knocked down fences, and didn't break down. Even 30 years after filming, it started up and drove across the parking lot as if it had just rolled off the assembly line. The Landmaster became a symbol of engineering rebellion. A machine created as fiction, but so real that even modern armored vehicles are afraid of it. And even though it's just a cinematic image, the ending is perfect. We started with a dream of a nuclear all-terrain vehicle, went through fire, ice, armor, and steel, and came to realize that reality has long since surpassed science fiction.